If I ever get assigned.
Last month when the presenters at the Emacs, then
Because I know that
meeting
I want to streak the
said that he pretty much always uses Emacs.
Yeah.
You can basically do that with Emacs.
You know, I went back down there.
Do it, Andrew.
We're recording now, so don't talk too badly about your mother.
But everybody else's mother,
How about your
totally
mother?
fair game.
Yeah.
It's 6:35. If anyone has any techie questions, we can start talking geeky while our presenter gets ready. Anyone break anything today?
Not that I'm admitting to.
How do you figure out if it is because IDE or SATA if HD farm doesn't work?
I would look at the module that is connected to via the kernel.
Okay. How do you do that?
Look at LS5, look at your module, see what's loaded. What are you breaking exactly?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how many disks are in there and what they are so we can replace them.
Are you trying to fix bud or what?
No, this is out. Open on.
Is it a Linux or what?
Yeah. Ubuntu 9.
That INXI?
And you're talking about recovery. He's trying to identify a node in dev.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's cool. What's going on there?
Block ID, might that do it?
Oh shit, my system just died. I'll come back to it.
Other than weed, did anyone break anything today? Any smoke, flames?
I forget, did I break anything?
You tried.
Right.
Stan, what did you fix for everybody in the world today?
I found a site on a Bluetooth for grep2.
Okay.
For drug what?
grep2.
You mean how to use it?
Troubleshooting.
Oh.
Because I had tried to install a Linux distro on one of my netbooks and the thing crashed and it burned and everything. And the grep came up and said error recovery, couldn't see anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I found this thing on the help.ubuntu.com/grub with a capital G 2/ troubleshoot. And it gave you a nice tutorial on how to use the grub2 in that mode when you get that error message. And the really handy thing is ls. And what it does is it lists the devices, the partitions that are there, and the system.
Yeah, basically all the IDs that you could possibly look for.
Right, and it gave you some specifications on how to redesignate what grub was. Apparently, when my install failed, it failed in the middle of pointing to the proper place. On one netbook, on another one, it seemed that I hadn't successfully installed anything, so no wonder it didn't close.
How many of you guys have used grub2 and some of its cool features?
Yeah.
Like booting over HTTP?
Ooh.
Or loading an ISO directly?
I haven't tried that, but it's in that tutorial.
Oh.
Fun stuff.
So I'm just up here entertaining while everything gets ready over here.
And
The tutorial, is that the troubleshooting tutorial?
the troubleshooting, and it actually is the best or the most well-written tutorial on grub that I've seen. There's so many things on grub or grub2. They talk about the differences, and they are really confusing. Whereas this, by stepping through this troubleshooting process, you more or less pick up a lot of the ways that you can deal with what you've got and where to go fix it. And then it makes more sense as to what the options are and where things are located.
Did you get everything fixed?
Yes, I did.
Good job, Stan.
I would have walked away.
Nothing in Alice Mappa.
Hey, pop quiz for the day. What's the search command for man?
Apropos. Man minus K.
Good job. And what's the other search option?
Apropos or man minus K, don't you?
Uppercase K.
Oh, okay.
Lowercase or uppercase. Two different things, right?
Title and content.
Yeah. So the uppercase is title? Uppercase is title.
What does /dev full do? This was a fun one today.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, full.
Dev full.
Oh, dear.
You all want?
It presents a full block device.
Oh, wow.
The Seeks will always succeed.
Oh, gotcha.
Anybody around doing any coding with using Raspberry Pi in order to make any home devices?
Mm-hmm. Lots of us.
I'm looking for one that will detect when my cat's bringing in dead things. So I want to hook one up to
Yeah,
the
usually
camera
if you
and-
feed your cat.
We have 4 different kinds of food down right now. But
Okay.
yet I still sometimes some evenings there's many as 3 bunnies running around.
Yeah, do you love your cat?
Yes, I do.
And do you pet on it?
Yeah.
Maybe you should stop. It's just trying to show you that it loves you too.
You don't need to hook it up to camera, because the camera parts $25 to look at it.
Yeah. For $25.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So if you're gonna do something like that, you're just gonna put on a little web camera and then go grayscale or go red and basically use it as an infrared camera to figure out if it's hot enough.
Oh.
Okay.
Our cat rescued a hamster one time.
Rescue?
Brought a hamster in from outside.
From the wild.
It really did not belong outdoors in the wintertime.
Everybody else here have at least one Raspberry Pi at home?
Last night I knew they had it on their sale page.
The BeagleBoard is better. I just ordered the BeagleBoard C last night. Or not last night.
It may be better compute-wise, but it's nowhere near mainstream as far as cases and stuff like that.
And that's not my concern. It has more GPIO than pretty much anything else.
True.
Continuation with cat story. The
Cat story?
CBS News had a video of a cat attacking a dog after it bit a child.
Okay. So is this an advertisement for cats? or
No,
against dogs?
it's just a story on the news.
And it really intrigued the
I
dog.
thought that was pretty cool.
Well, I mean, think about it. The Egyptians built a cat statue. They did not build a dog statue.
My cat was challenged by a dog across the backyard, and the cat said it belonged to the dog. The dog challenged it. My cat stood his ground.
So everybody, Stan, do we have an attendance list to pass around?
It's going around. It's up over there by Ted.
I thought we didn't need that.
Oh, with your tags? I don't know.
The tag is a social thing, so when I walk up to you and say, hey, who are you? You'll say, look, read right here.
So that's so you can socialize.
Yeah.
How many of you guys have used the word ask as a noun?
What word?
People,
Did you answer to the ask?
what's your ask?
What's your ask?
Yeah, I hate that. And I'm not a resource either, thank you.
How do you do that full?
By the way, if someone calls you a resource,
Just do ma'am, Doug.
Call him overhead.
call them over.
Oh, yeah.
Always full.
So Gary, I was entertaining for you. Do you have anything to add before we get started?
Nope. You should be going. Go, go, go.
Were you late for a reason? Did you have a date?
He's always
with,
late.
with the rainstorm, yes.
Gary does the break time, the,
I know, I was just being facetious.
for those that don't know.
So. Well, what do you think? Are you about ready?
Whenever you're ready. I didn't realize you were vamping for my benefit. So
I was not vamping. I was just blowing off stress from the day.
I just figured we were waiting on Gary because that's normally what we do.
You'd have been here till normally 9:02.
But did you have anything unrelated to Heartbleed that you want to talk to?
No, it's
me?
not Heartbleed I'm doing. I'm doing the Vim portion.
Maybe we could talk about this CVE 2014-0196 that came out today.
I cannot.
The kernel exploit. Did you guys see this?
New exploit. Wow.
New kernel exploit.
Cool.
Vulnerable TTY devices.
What?
Yeah. Denial of service against kernel. Vulnerable TTY devices. Even your virtual TTYs.
Wow.
So how
Any
do
user can shut the server down.
Oh. That's cool. Sounds really, let's try it.
So one of my Debian boxes installing a new kernel today?
Actually, Debian wasn't vulnerable.
Oh. Maybe it will be after this.
CentOS would shut down. There was one person that was able to demonstrate a escalation of service, but it was on a custom compiled kernel. So,
Is this one that a bunch of somebody had corrected the problem unknowingly?
so in Debian they had unknowingly addressed the TTY module and accidentally made it still work.
Oh.
It still affects it. It does create CPU load, but it does not crash or present escalation.
Oh, the halfway fix.
Yeah.
That's good.
I think that's it. Are you ready?
Yeah, question. I know I'm doing the shorter portion tonight before the Heartbleed portion, so I don't know. We're at about, what, 11 or 12 till 7? When should I cut off?
9.
Because as Lee was talking about earlier, I can just go and go and go. And I know Buchek would love nothing more than for me to talk about Vim for hours.
Shane, the second you feel uncomfortable, throw your water bottle on the ground, okay?
No, but seriously, how long should I go?
Starting at 7:30.
Yeah, it's entirely up to him. He's
Okay.
calling you, so it's entirely
All right, so we'll cut off in, say, half an hour, and then there'll be time for questions or so. Okay, I did see a note on the list. I think you responded to it, but I didn't see the original message about what is Quickfix. Because I'm talking about Vim's Quickfix and location lists tonight. It's going to be a fairly short, really informal talk. And somebody's like, well, I don't know what that is. So really quickly, well, first of all, full disclosure. I know what the Quickfix list is, but I always felt like it was one of those Vim features that I wasn't really using to its fullest extent. So when Gary asked me, hey, what do you want to talk about at the upcoming Sloop meeting? I'm like, well, let me think of a topic that I don't feel all that good about yet, and then I'll say I'll talk on it. And by the time I have to do the talk, I'll feel a lot smarter. That's normally the way that I learn stuff, is I offer to give a presentation. So that's exactly what I did with this. And so that's why I said this is going to be fairly informal, pretty loose. I don't have a slide deck to go through. I'm going to kind of take you through the process of learning about Vim's Quickfix and location lists capacities, about the same way that I did over the last couple of weeks, so that you'll come out here at about the same place that I am, and you'll have a new tool to play with. So really simply, the Quickfix list is just a feature in Vim that understands lists made up of file names and line numbers and optional column numbers. So in fact, if you look at the help for Quickfix, that's exactly what it says. And it does provide a little bit of history as well. This comes from the Amiga heritage of Vim. A lot of people don't know that Bram originally wrote Vim because he wanted a better VI emulator on his Amiga, and he used the Manx or Manix, depending on who you ask, Aztec C compiler on the Amiga, and it had a mode called the Quickfix mode that allowed you to very quickly get a list of errors back from your compiler and jump to the location of that error, do something, and then keep going. So it was a quick fix, edit, compile, edit cycle that you could go through, and he liked that, so he stuffed it into his VI clone, and that's how we ended up with the Quickfix mode inside of Vim. A lot of people shy away from the Quickfix mode because they think, oh, that's related to C programming. In fact, all of the Quickfix window commands start with C something, and I think that probably does come from the fact that it was originally used for programming or for compiling and changing C code. But the fact of the matter is, I haven't written C code in anger in years. There was a time in my life when that's all that I did. But I don't write in C anymore, yet I still live in Vim's Quickfix mode for things like grep and for ACK and JS Hint and all of these other tools that have adopted this same sort of mode. Because again, it's really just a list of file names, line numbers, and optional column numbers, along with a bit of text that says why you should care about this particular line. So the place that you'll most often see Quickfix mode, let's use this guy here. So I'm in the middle of a project that's got a lot of JavaScript in it. So in the built into Vim, there's the vim grep command, which is a built-in version of grep that comes along with Vim. You've actually got grep, which is a wrapper around an external Vim command, and you've got vim grep, which is, frankly, if you're on Windows or if you don't like your local grep command, there's one that's built into Vim for you. So I'm using this just for example's sake, but it's just grep inside of Vim. So I'm going to grep this project for the word function, and I can't open the file. So I'm going to grep this project for the word function higher up, if I can type. Nope, I'm in the wrong place. Let's see, repair, Quickfix. This is the casual part of the casual presentation. Let's see. By the way, I reinstalled Homebrew on my machine after the Homebrew discussion on the list over the past few days, and I have broken everything. So be warned that we're gonna see some of the evidence of that. So, for example, I just think I crashed my Vim, so we may have to go back in.
And what's the normal rule of presentations? Never do an install immediately before.
But see, I thought I'd recovered from all of this until tonight. All right. Let's see if we can make this thing behave. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop doing that one. So I'll use a different one instead because I'm not able to make that one behave at the moment. But the idea is that, again, you've got a list of file names, locations inside of a file. So for example, I'm looking at a large JavaScript file here. This thing's got way too many lines in it. It's a combination of a bunch of other files, so 1,500 lines long. And I'm going to run JSHint against it. JSHint is a linting program for JavaScript that JavaScript not being a compiled language, it's a way of getting problems in your JavaScript other than just running it in production and seeing what blows up. So in this case, I have added something into this that I know is going to cause JSHint to complain. I have a let's see. So I have a JSHint RC file that I've set up. That's all the things that I want JSHint to complain about. So there's all of these different things that I could get it to do. I'm not going to go into the specific details, but the idea is that there are things that I want to be warned about if I'm doing in my application. So in this case, I've added an error to this. It's something that would actually run in production, but I don't want it in my production code. So I have the JSHint command that I'll run, and it brings up a Quickfix list. So if you notice, this follows the same structure I was talking about before. I run the JSHint command, and it says, in app.js controllers.js, on line 43, column 3, this is an error, or this is a problem that I found in your file. So if I sit on that line and I simply hit return, it jumps to the specific line that I've got. Line 43, column 3, it says, I found the problem there. Again, this has got a heritage of C programming, so you can imagine instead of looking at JavaScript, we could be running the GCC compiler against this and getting a list of errors back. This is the same sort of thing. There's just a plugin called JSHint that does the same thing with the Quickfix list, with this location list that you would get by running the C compiler against it. But again, they all tend to follow this same structure. The column part is optional, but it is nice to have because, let's see. So it actually jumps you to the specific place that you've got. But again, even if you're not doing a lot of development, this is still a handy thing to have around because you could do finds across multiple files. You could do anything where a list of locations, rows and columns actually come in handy. You can get use out of this. And a simple example of that, we'll close this, is for Vim itself. A lot of people aren't aware, and I'll do it just from a blank window, you've got help inside of Vim, and it's extremely useful and overwhelmingly comprehensive sometimes. But a lot of people don't realize that it's just as searchable as any other text. I mean, these are just plain text files. So built into Vim, there's a help grep command. So if I wanted to find out, for example, about Quickfix, I do a help grep Quickfix, and now it tells me, and you have to look kind of closely down at the bottom, 1 of 274 hits, and then it gives me a tiny little line and jumps me to the first location. You have to look a little closely. So inside of all of the Vim help, it's found this particular line. It's the first line of 274 where the word Quickfix is found. Well, that's great, but then you've got to sit here and start going, :C next, because remember, all these commands start with C. So I'm navigating through this Quickfix list. Now I'm going to jump to the next one. Turn on the cursor line so you can see it. So there's the next hit, and then I'm going to hit C next again. Well, that's kind of painful. So what I can say is well, open up the entire Quickfix window for me, C open. And now you can actually see all 274 places that it's found this for me. And I can get a little bit of context as to each one of these. So in the very Vim help files themselves, I've got act.txt and autocommand.txt, all the different places where it uses the word Quickfix somewhere. And when I see the one that I want, I just jump to it. Yes, sir.
If this is in a program, would that be something generated by this, or would it be on the right? Would that be your comments?
Oh, in this case,
because it's a help file.
It's that line of the help file. But if it were, say, a compiler giving back compiler error messages, that would be the error associated with that line. And to jump ahead just slightly, since Vim wants to be able to deal with any kind of text file in the world, and therefore any kind of programming language, and therefore any kind of compiler or linter or whatever else you might have, you've actually got settings in here like error format and the grep program and compiler that will let you say, I'm using this kind of compiler and it gives back errors in this specific format. And if you look here and here and here, you can find the file name and the line number and the column number and the error message, and it will actually parse those messages for you and turn it into this Quickfix list for you.
I have spent weeks going through the Vim help file. It's just amazing.
Oh, yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff in there.
In Damian Conway's presentation at OSCON a couple of years ago, he's like, who here has read all of the Vim help? And he raises his hand, and I raised my hand, and I looked around and no one else in the room had actually read. It was 500 people in this room, and because it's incredibly voluminous. So again, this is another one of the reasons why I do stuff like this, because I know that there are these corners where even if I've seen the feature, there's so much about it. The reason I pulled up the Quickfix documentation is just to be able to do this. Holy crap. There's so much stuff here. You need 3% of it. But sometimes you might need 1 extra % of it, but you don't know which 97 out of that 97% left over that you actually need.
Wandering around in there, you just find stuff that's amazing, like digraphs.
Right.
Those are amazing.
Yeah, incredibly useful stuff that you never know that it's there unless you happen to just stumble across it, or you come here on the right night and we talk about it, something like that. So again, you begin to get the idea that this is a list of places that are useful to you based on whatever it is that you just did. In this case, I'm searching the Vim help file, and I can get all of these locations. But I could also be searching the file system. I could be searching text. The other nice thing about it is, and I pulled up in a web page where they talk about this, there's a trick that you can do. Again, since a Quickfix list is so simple, do a little bit of what I call poor man's debugging. You can just put print statements in, or put string, or printf, or whatever it is that is appropriate to your language. And if it follows a form that's roughly this, and then you grab that output where you've got the file name, the file name, the line number, and then whatever text you want, Vim automatically knows how to deal with that. So you can say, hey, load this in as a Quickfix, and you've got the execution path of your program. So let's say that you start at the beginning and you've got a print statement that shows you the beginning of the execution, then you drop into a loop and you've got 10 times through the loop and it's showing you this. Well, you get back a list that looks a lot like this. That's beginning of the program, every step through the loop, and then you can hit return on that location in the Quickfix list, and it will jump you to that point in your code, to that debugging statement in your code.
Is Quickfix built in?
Yeah, Quickfix is just built. If it's compiled into your Vim, which by default, unless you've got a deliberately anemic Vim for a very lightweight system, it'll be compiled into the system. So yeah, it's just built in.
That's cool.
So, oops, I can spell. Somewhere in here there should be a -Q. Which apparently I can't read. It's not my night. Oh, this also may be pulling the local Vim on the Mac, which I'm not sure if it's built into that one or not. But there is a command line command where you simply say, load this in, load the file that I'm giving you in, and load it as a file in the Quickfix window. Even internally to Vim, if you use the cfile command, that's read the error file and jump to the first error. So that's the equivalent. And that's what I'm saying. It's the equivalent of starting with the -Q option. But built into any Vim that has it compiled, let's see. Somewhere in there should be, yes, plus Quickfix right there. So that means this version of Vim was compiled with the Quickfix feature. So if your version of Vim has it compiled in, then yes, this is built into your version of Vim. But it's not an external plugin, for example. You don't have to go grab it off the internet as long as it's compiled in. By the way, in case you didn't see that, I got that with version. And that's a good way to see how, what's actually in your Vim. So again, the trick is that even if you aren't worried about grepping a bunch of files or running JSHint or whatever, if you just want to do this poor man's debugging trick, that's a really useful trick to have around. It is kind of slick to be able to see, oh, at this point in my program, I was I was doing this thing, and then jump to that portion of your program just by hitting return on the line. One thing I was showing you earlier was the navigation of the Quickfix window. Again, you open it by saying copen, but I'm going to close it back up. And in this case, I did a help grep on the Quickfix command. And notice it didn't open it up for me automatically. Instead, it split my window and jumped me to the first hit and gave me this little line down at the bottom, which, again, if that's what you want, that's great. But most of the time you want to hit copen, or almost no one actually uses the entire command. It's usually cope, which I always find amusing. So it's like, I have a bunch of errors. What do I need to do? I need to cope. Okay. But if you don't want to do that, again, you can use the cin and or cnext and cprev commands. Cnext, which will jump you to the next hit in the Quickfix list. And if you want to maximize what you actually see on your screen, that can be a useful thing to do. But I almost never type those entire commands because, again, :cnext, :cprev, that's a little painful. So a trick that doesn't have something that's not specifically to do with the Quickfix window, but is still really handy to know, is that you can run the most recent X command, like :cnext, :cprev, :ls, whatever, by hitting the @ and a colon from normal mode. Because Vim considers that kind of an automatic macro. So in case it's not clear what I'm talking about, I just hit :cnext, so I jump to the next one. Well, I could hit colon and the up arrow and just keep doing that, and that works. But a quicker way to do that is, like I said, to hit the @ and hit colon. Now, what that tells Vim is run the previous X command. It's like in the same way that you could record a macro as like macro A and hit @A and run that macro over and over again, you can hit @ and just rerun the last X command over and over again. So @ will jump me through matches much more quickly. And again, this isn't limited to just the Quickfix window. This is just a good Vim trick to know to very quickly navigate through something or run the same X command over and over again. And in fact, there's even a shorter way to do it. Vim remembers the previous X command, lets you run it as a macro, @ colon, and it also remembers the last macro that you ran if you just hit @. So what you can say is, you can run an X command, then hit @ colon to rerun that X command, and then just bounce on the @ key over and over again to keep running that command. Yeah.
How is it different from the period?
Period is just repeat the last change that you made while you were in insert mode. So it's a very restricted form of macros. So period wouldn't redo this because I'm not actually making any changes. I'm running an X command. Period doesn't rerun X commands. It's just like keep doing the last change that I made in insert mode. Super useful, but deliberately very restricted to just that one little piece. So to finish this kind of overly long demo I was talking about, colon C.
You wouldn't be, you wouldn't set some kind of a shortcut for this.
Well, I'm getting to that.
Aha.
And in fact, I'm not going to set the shortcut, but I'm going to point you to a plugin that has all those shortcuts already there, and that you should be running anyway. So yes, that is it. Of course, you're like, I don't want to type these 9 characters over and over and over again. What am I, an animal? So you define a key map for that. But someone's already done a very good job of defining those key maps in a very standard way. So I'm just going to point you toward that and recommend that you use it. So again, colon C next if I want to navigate through a list, a Quickfix list, @ colon to rerun the previous command, which in this case is colon C next, or @ in order to rerun the last macro that I made. So again, not specifically related to the Quickfix list, but very generally handy Vim things to know, because if you find yourself needing to rerun the same X command over and over again, @ colon is a quick way to get there, and then once you've done that, @ is a very quick way to get to that. That makes sense? I know I kind of blasted through that very quickly, but my notes back up on my iPad here.
So it's possible to compile Vim without Quickfix.
It is. It's possible to compile Vim without lots of things. And in fact, that's one of the things that people often run into. If you're on a system, a distribution that has been compiled to be extremely lightweight, then all that stuff that I was showing you here, the vast majority of those things will just not be there.
Wouldn't it be likely to have I instead of Vim in that case?
Do what?
No.
Wouldn't it be more likely to have VI instead of Vim in that case?
Well, you may have Vim that has been configured to run in compatibility mode. Most distros that I know of anymore don't have VI on them. They have Vim that is running in VI compatibility mode, which is very nearly bug compatible with VI, and a lot of the stuff is ripped out. But you probably wouldn't have auto commands or Arabic support built into
It wouldn't have a lot of the things the real VI enthusiast would want from classic times also.
It could be, and I'll be honest, I'm not really familiar enough with what is or isn't there in a minimalist Vim installation, because I don't run a minimalist Vim installation, so it would be hard for me to say. Visual mode is one, ironically enough, visual mode is one that's often missing. So the ability to come in here and do that, or to whatever, or my favorite, Control V to go into visual block mode. I'll spread the gospel of visual block mode. People will run home and try it on their Slackware system from 1996, and it won't be there because it's not compiled into their Vim. So the visual mode, visual extra. Those are a couple of things to look for that are very commonly missing from more minimalist Vim environments. But again, the moral of the story is the version command will tell you everything about that. Gary, do you have a question, or are you just resting on top of your head? Okay. Wanted to point out very quickly, again, the things that use the Quickfix window or the Quickfix list are things like grep, like the built-in vim grep command, which I promise you actually does work, even though I broke it on my system. If you're a programmer and you're not familiar with the ACK command, ACK, that's something definitely worth getting used to. I think Andy moved it to beyondgrep.com. Yeah, ACK.
Build the cat command.
Well, Bill the Cat said a lot, so that's the icon that's used for it. But yeah, ACK, and there are actually some offshoots of ACK now. I think the most popular one is called AG.
Also, search for the Silver Surfer.
The Silver Surfer.
Silver being AG.
Oh, okay, the AG Surfer.
Well, no, spell the Silver Surfer. If you homebrew install it, it's b_silver_surfer.
Okay. Silver Searcher? That sound right?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Silver Searcher?
Yeah.
Oh, not Surfer, but Searcher.
Yeah, this is, I probably shouldn't even go down this rat hole. But if you're a developer and you want something that works a lot like grep but is smarter about code, ACK is that tool. And then there are faster versions of what ACK does, like AG or the Silver Searcher, that are very similar but claim to do things faster. Andy Lester, who's actually spoken at this meeting before, is the original guy behind ACK, and then several other people have started working on it as well. But again, if you've ever dealt with grep on a large code base, grep is sometimes too good at its job, so it finds all sorts of things that you don't want it to find, or it doesn't understand types of files, especially certain types of code. It doesn't know what to ignore, things like that. ACK is much, much smarter about that. So you can use ACK from Vim simply by changing the grep program setting to use ACK instead, but that is not the way that I recommend doing this. If you do it this way, then it will automatically pretend to be grep, but sometimes you actually want grep. Other times you actually want ACK. So there is a plugin called ACK that understands how to use ACK when you want it and leaves grep alone. But all of them do the right thing when it comes to using the Quickfix. So I just ran ACK all by itself, and it loads, it says I didn't find a regular expression, so it's listing one thing in the Quickfix window with no location, no file name, and gives you a little bit of help down at the bottom as to what you're actually supposed to be doing. But what it does is it loads up the Quickfix list just like grep does, just like JSHint does, just like any of these other utilities would normally do. So you can, again, use the same cnext, cprev, navigation stuff that we already talked about. It just does the right thing. So the reason I'm telling you about ACK, one, it's a really useful utility. Two, is if you find yourself having to shoehorn things into the Quickfix list, that's probably the wrong answer. There's almost certainly going to be a plugin that will let you do the right thing. So another example would be Tim Pope's Fugitive plugin, the interface to Git. So let's see. Yeah. So I have Fugitive installed on this system. So I'm looking at this project that's a Git project, and it knows that I've modified, the IntoxTrack web client controllers.js file. This is the one that I changed in order to run JSHint against it. So it's an interface to Git. That's a very, very full-featured plugin. It would take me hours to talk about all the things that it can do. But one of the things it has built into it is a grep command. It's a built-in grep program that knows how to search through a Git repository. And so you use grep and some arguments, and it will grep with git grep instead of the default grep program. And again, it will load up the Quickfix window for you. So again, the idea is that if you have something where you're thinking, gosh, it would be really useful to have a list of locations and file names and locations and column numbers, so I will hack my way through the grep program setting and the error format setting and all of that in order to make Vim understand it. Look for a plugin first. There's almost always going to be a plugin that does what you want if you've got something that's even vaguely popular. So I listed a few. Already mentioned grep and Vim grep and ACK, the Silver Searcher that Greg mentioned is a good one. Fugitive's grep command. Another big one that's I don't use it but probably should is called Syntactic. That is a plugin that uses the Quickfix window along with a bunch of other Vim features to do real-time highlighting of the syntax or of errors and syntax issues in your code, and will let you very quickly jump around and fix them. So all these things understand how to use the Quickfix window. Any questions so far? Because I know I'm blasting through a bunch of stuff. I'm trying to finish up in the next 5 minutes here. Okay. Last big thing I want to talk about is you may have heard me mention the term location list on occasion. The Quickfix list and the location list are very similar ideas, but they're not exactly the same. Very simply, The Quickfix list is global to all of them. So notice I've got multiple tabs open, I've got multiple buffers open right now. There is one Quickfix list going on for all of these things. If I open it up, notice the last thing that I did was that act command, and there's nothing in there right now. So if I go over to this first tab and I open this up, I get the same Quickfix list. Same thing here, no matter where I happen to be. The location list, there isn't a single location list. There are multiple location lists. Location lists are a similar idea, but you can have as many of them as you want. If you've got 30 different buffers and you want to have 30 different location lists, you can have that. So in a few places, I've kind of been fast and loose. Several things like the JS hint window or the JS hint list, I believe is actually a location list because it's local to the specific file that I'm working on. So if I had 16 JavaScript files open, I can have a different set of problems with each one of those. Those would be location lists. The reason that this is something that you might want to be aware of is that there are commands that specifically operate on the Quickfix list, and there are commands that specifically operate on location lists. And they're usually the same commands, but one's prefixed with a C and one's prefixed with an L. C for Quickfix and L for location list. So like b&gt I talked about earlier, search for pattern in the file, set the error list to the matches. The error list in this case is the Quickfix list. But there's also an lvim-grep command that is same as b&gt, except use the location list for the current window instead of the global Quickfix list. This is just a useful distinction, and you won't care about it until you think, gosh, I wish I weren't just dealing with one list for all of the buffers and all the files that I've got open. Why isn't there one that's like specific to each file? That's when you need to remember, oh yeah, location lists. And again, the pattern is command or the same command with an L in front of it is usually the one that knows how to deal with location lists. Even plugins like the ACK plugin typically have variations like LAC. So it's just like ACK, but instead of the Quickfix list, matches are placed in the current location list. So again, I'm not going to go very deep on this. They're essentially the same thing, except one is global, one is local to the file that you're currently working on, and it's very handy when you have, you want to do the same kind of operation, but you want to keep separate ones for different files. Does that make sense? Okay. You seem befuddled.
Oh, it's just I need to sit down.
So yeah, I mean, grep, lgrep. Same as grep, except use the location list. So what I usually recommend is get used to the global one, and then when you find yourself needing one that's more specific, that's when you think, oh yeah, location list. And then finally, just a few resources. Already told you about ACK. Craig mentioned the Silver Searcher, which I'm glad he did because I would never remembered that. The Vim documentation for Quickfix is, as with all of Vim documentation, extremely comprehensive, and that can be just befuddling. So usually what I recommend is using simpler documentation so that you know what to look up in the Vim documentation. So start with Google and then come back to the Vim docs because there's just so much stuff here, and it's so comprehensive and so completist that it will blow your mind. So yes, sometimes I want to display the count next error starting in the next file. Oh, it's nuts. You don't need to know all that. Half a dozen commands will get you everywhere that you need to go. With that in mind, a book that I recommend many times is Drew Neal's Practical Vim, specifically Chapter 17, Compile Code, Navigate Errors with the Quickfix List, and he talks about just the simple stuff that you need to know. So here, for example, is the set of commands to browse the Quickfix list that are actually useful to you. Jump to the next one, jump to the previous, go to the first one, go to the last one, go to the first item, the next file, the previous file. So it's very easy to jump around quite quickly in a Quickfix list and then open and close the whole thing. These commands in this form are pretty much all you'll need to know for 95% of what it is you would do with a Quickfix list. When you need to do more, that's when you dig deep into this stuff. And again, that's this book. If you haven't heard me recommend it before, highly, highly recommended. Practical Vim, great book. Probably the best current book on Vim around. It takes the practical part extremely seriously. It's in cookbook format, so a tip covers 2 or 3 pages, and every one of them is something really useful to know. And speaking of your dot command thing, Drew talks a lot about how to use Vim in such a way that the dot command is 100 times more useful. It's really, really good stuff. I understood what the dot command did, but until I kind of read the way that Drew recommended using Vim in order to take maximum advantage of it, I was getting no mileage out of it whatsoever. The book is worth it just for his discussion of that. Everything else is a bonus, but it's a really, really good book. And finally, the thing that I mentioned earlier when Don was talking about shortcuts, Tim Pope, who is the god of Vim plugins, has a plugin called Unimpaired. The pair part is the important part, unimpaired. There are lots and lots of lists to navigate inside of Vim. We've been talking about Quickfix and the location list. There are others. There are things like the buffer list, the arg list, and it's sometimes painful to navigate these things because they all have different commands associated with them. They tend to follow a similar model, like B next and B previous, C next, C previous, C first, C last. But again, those are long commands to type, and you have to do the tricks like I was talking about at the beginning in order to repeat them. So what he has is a number of motions, or excuse me, mappings that he has provided that do that for all of these different lists. So arg list, previous and next, buffer list, location list, and the Quickfix list. And his Quickfix list mappings make a little more sense than the C previous, C next, because they actually start with Q. So it's bracket Q and bracket uppercase Q, or left bracket, right bracket, uppercase, lowercase q, to do the things that you would expect them to do. So to get to the previous buffer, it's left bracket Q. To get to the next buffer, or excuse me, to the next Quickfix item, it's right bracket Q. To get to the first, get to the last, it's the uppercase version of those. And then he's got several others that are related to these mappings, but these are the ones that you actually care about. So if you don't ever use the arg list, you don't need to care about the A's. But navigating the buffer list, navigating the Quickfix list, these are really handy to have around. And again, it's a Tim Pope plugin, so it's well written, it's extremely well maintained, and fits in well with the 500 other Tim Pope plugins there are out there, so you know it's going to work well with things like Fugitive and with all of the others that he's constantly writing. He's like a Vim plugin machine. If you're not familiar with Tim Pope, that's the thing you ought to take away from here tonight. Go get familiar with what Tim Pope does, because he makes Vim incredibly, even more useful than it already is. So I know I've blown through a lot of information very fast. Any questions, any thoughts, anything that I'm not going to ask if anything didn't make sense, because then Don will ask me a question. But anything anybody wants to talk about? You're all stunned into silence. But I'm right on time, so that should count for something. All right, thank you.
That was Bill Odom. Bill is founder or co-founder of the Vim user group here in town. They meet monthly. And a frequent presenter here. So we thank him for, as always, challenging amount of information that someone downloads into a series of these things.
This was the short presentation. This was the very fast, casual presentation.
That's what I love about Bill. I call him and say, Bill, you got anything you can talk to us about next month? And he goes, oh, yeah, you want the long version, the short version? How many days would you like me to put that? So anyway, we'll do our Oreo cookie version of a meeting. So we've got a presentation on the front, presentation on the back. We're in that middle gooey center right now. So we do announcements, we do a general question and answer, and then we take a quick break to go visit the coffee machine, the bathroom, and then come back for the second feature presentation. With that, announcements. What? Lee, announcement?
Bud's still down.
Uh-oh.
If anybody would like to play with it, let me know.
I want to fix Amber before we fix Bud.
You've been fixing Amber.
Well, I want to fix her.
Finish fix.
Okay. Are you wanting our blessing to reboot it?
No, I sent some emails to system admin. Does anyone respond to that list?
Yes. Well, we read it.
Yes, we read it. As you all can tell, if you haven't been on the sysadmin list, yes, there is all kinds of stuff going on in the background. If any of you would like to help run these machines, run these meetings, you're more than welcome, and see one of the four of us, and we'll help get you lined up to contribute something to this organization. So.
Be careful about complaining because we
No.
have solutions for complaints.
A very equitable one, too.
Anyway, other announcements. Tomorrow night is the St. Louis Linux user group, i.e. LUG, St. Louis LUG meeting.
By the way, kudos to Andrew for the new website.
Now, when I finish the other one, then we can have a party.
Yeah.
Oh, the Linux one's excellent.
And the presentations tomorrow night are going to be by Andrew and Ken, and they're going to talk about backups and Bacula, correct?
Bacula and testing your backups.
Ooh.
That thing that you guys have never done.
That's why I use our snapshot. I can test them all the time. Just look at the file.
No, I'm talking bare metal.
Oh, I don't do bare metal.
Because if we just unbox this server and you have a tape in the server, and that's it.
But, yeah.
I usually just buy a new hard drive and move everything off the old one to the new one.
And a bigger hard drive every single time. Yep.
Okay, so that's tomorrow night. That meeting is at UMSL's IT Enterprises incubator, which is right at 170 and 70th, right?
Yeah, there's a map off the website. Yeah, I don't know where it is.
Next Wednesday, a lunch meeting for the SUSE Linux Novell user group. It's the keynote address from SUSECon. The director from IBM is going to be talking about how IBM has been using SUSE Linux a lot on their VMs, the mainframe system. You guys use SUSE?
We're going to have to because we're going with HANA, which is using.
Okay.
But until this point, we've only had like one or two machines in house that were SUSE, so it's going to be a learning experience.
I'll tell you one thing, gas to save my bacon more than once, so.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's something nobody else has. It's worth it to me for that.
So the SUSE group meetings are always good and informative, and the lunch is free, good food, so you're all welcome to come to that. Speaking of what's going on in the machine room, down the hall, elevator, whatever, Valerie here is our representative from Graybar, where we're at. Graybar has graciously provided us the space and also provided us good substance, so thank you, Valerie. And they also obviously, as I asked, they're running an IBM mainframe with a bunch of VMs, and somewhere hidden in there is some various things. Let's see, other announcements, what am I forgetting?
I had a couple.
Go.
I should have done them while I was still sitting there. I don't know how much it'll apply to this crowd, but if any of you are doing Angular development, AngularJS for front-end JavaScript development, there is a monthly meeting that normally occurs at lunchtime on the third Wednesday of each month. This month is going to be on the fourth Wednesday. It's at Oasis Digital down at Manchester 270 area, where we get together for about an hour and somebody talks about the stuff that they've been doing with Angular development. I'm going to be presenting this month on advanced AngularJS directives. If you really love Angular and can't get enough and you need some training on it, or if you have coworkers that need training on it, there's actually a class being held at Oasis Digital on the 19th, 20th, and 21st that I'll be teaching for them. But that one costs money. The Angular lunch is totally free and everybody's welcome. Just RSVP at angularlunch.wordpress.com, and so they'll know how much pizza and soft drinks to buy.
Do we have that on our calendar?
Probably not, because this is the first time thinking to tell you about it.
Okay. That's easy to click.
It can stay and type that, but that's good.
I can't even remember what I had for breakfast. How am I going to remember all that?
Yeah, I can shoot you
We'll get that
information.
all. Okay.
But I mean, if you go to Angular Lunch, all one word, .wordpress.com, that's the site that Kyle Cordes set up to talk about the meetings. And again, it's normally third Wednesday during lunch of each month. And this time it's the fourth Wednesday because it would conflict with the class that I'm teaching. So imagine what I did here, but a little slower with actual slides and rich examples spread out over 3 days. and that's the class. And then the lunchtime is pretty much what you saw here. Just about Angular, so. Change the title. Is what
Yeah.
What was the website again?
Angular Lunch.
How do you spell Angular?
If you just type,
Okay, you
How
guys,
you spell it?
you guys can pick this up later. Thank you.
I would just do search for Angular space lunch.
Yeah, it'll be the first.
Other announcements? Oh, another announcement. Last year, I guess we did a social thing where we went to the Shakespeare Company actually does a comedy theatrical production every year. And last year they did 2 episodes of the original Star Trek as a comedy with Shakespearean actors. And it was funny, really, really funny. This actually last weekend and this coming Friday and Saturday. They're doing again a comedy of science fiction. It is 2 of the original episodes of Twilight Zone, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, which just happens to have been the William Shatner episode, and To Serve Man.
No spoilers. No spoilers.
No spoilers.
No spoilers. So, as I say, the theater group does a great job of it, so maybe we'll try and pull together, look on the discussion list, and maybe we'll all go to one of the shows from Friday soon. So, any other announcements?
I'm talking with a startup in St. Louis about finding some hardware hackers. And if any of you guys are bored and semi-retired and want to help out and do some hardware hacking, we're looking for some people that are experienced with doing a battery-powered, kind of a portable device that can do crazy things. See me for more details.
Cool. Any other announcements? Good. General question and answer. Anything, you can ask a question about anything. It doesn't have to be about Heartbleed. It doesn't have to be about Vim. It doesn't have to be about any of this. It's probably not going to get an answer unless there's something new about computers. But
Who's looking for work? That's it? Really? What?
Pretty much. Everybody else is retired.
Doesn't mean they're not looking for work. Who's got jobs? No, who has jobs to offer other people?
Oh. See the man in the back.
Has everyone signed the attendance list?
No.
No.
Go
Go ahead, take it back to break.
Any other questions? Last chance.
Well, I would just like to introduce Dwayne Randall. He's our newest Quickfix team member at Graybar. So, those of you who've already met me, let me reintroduce myself with my new last name, Bacon. B-A-C-O-N. Bacon. Yes. I'm recently divorced and very happy to be.
It feels wrong to applaud that. It feels wrong to applaud that.
If you knew the situation, you would.
So you should see the other guy.
Okay, all that having been said, if we have no other questions, we will take a maybe 5-minute break, get something to drink, go visit the bathroom. We'll get set up for Heartbleed next. Come back. All right.
Yeah. I guess that's Mike.
Yep, that's you. Obviously, you're Shane. I'm Gary.
Good to meet you in person.
Yeah.
Hey, that hardware stuff you guys doing? We learned all about it. Lester. That hardware stuff you guys doing? Okay. Been here.
Remote monitoring.
You were in
Remote monitoring.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Sam?
Excuse me, visually.
Speakers?
No, when you're doing infrared monitoring of humans. No retained data.
I couldn't find any with your
I'm sorry?
The camera to get high on, I just got them today, they're IR.
Right, but processing the data.
That's one neighbor again.
Okay.
Should I connect to Graybar guest?
Yes. Graybar guest.
There's no password. I'm like, no, it's better.
It just works.
We changed it. Yeah. It's sort of a different thing. That's better than grep.
Does it not like sites that have their HTTPS? That's kind of like an
I'm sorry, again.
It's like, how to
Okay, so it works for HTTP sites, not HTTPS sites.
today, and it's Arch, and a couple, like a month or so ago, you talked about 400 temperatures.
Yeah. Will the guest account not do?
The history, I just looked up.
SSL?
The Beagle's just I saw the personal reference.
Will the guest account not do SSL?
It's not letting me do SSL stuff, which I kind of need to do for this.
Actually,
I'm using SSL over. Actually, we're live broadcasting to YouTube over SSL.
Okay.
Craig, I know that you're not a guy, so I'm trying to check your DNS.
Ask you to log in. A Graybar thing.
It never gave you, and it never gave you one of those.
Hey, Valerie?
No, I decided to go with team was using that to try to use
Is there a way to force the Graybar login to come
funny
on?
thing is, I've got some things sort of starting to hit in my head.
It's letting me connect to
Like,
HTTP, but not
Emacs, I've got
HTTPS sites.
CW sometimes.
And it did last.
I don't know either. They just completely.
I'm having trouble getting certain things on the network, so I use from some things to do it phenomenally well.
Never speak any language properly the rest of their lives. Yeah, I'm that person that sort of.
So are you finding guests? Are you? What do you do? Myron's. There you go. If you go to Myron's, it should be.
I'm on Graybar guest. Should I connect to WireEnd?
Try WireEnd.
25-year-olds. It's better than and it's an insert code automatically. That's the big thing. I hate insert. The most just.
Let's try.
So I'm getting in now.
Oh, that's fine.
Oh, and they just changed.
Only my established connections are working. All new connections are
The new ones are
Should probably uncheck to remember this password so it doesn't say
I've
password.
set this meeting.
Yeah, Gary said he thought it was really well. It's hard for me to tell because people don't give one.
Yeah, I understand.
There was very little. Stuff is working.
Yes, sir.
We're having a firewall yesterday.
I don't know, I
Having
think
issues
you
with firewall yesterday, and the scanning going on has been booting things up.
I wish I was paying attention.
So it could be either one of those. It could be a scam.
Okay, cool. It's working.
So are you okay now?
Basically,
Works now.
Building out like.
Alright, I'm gonna go get a beverage. I'm starting to wonder, should I bring drinks?
So if you're interested in Emacs, I went with, I can help you out. Yeah, I think the audience wants to know about pretty happy.
Over the years,
And I started doing like 12
they actually were celebrating.
Most of these guys like that.
It was really awesome. And they all went so well.
Probably
We
people that use
actually brought in a
stuff
countdown.
through
We
mostly.
got tickets to make sure people didn't do too much.
Well, it's not used very much.
But-
Well, that was one of
And then
the things that I
everybody
found
didn't
were
really say anything about it. It's been very-
Like Graybar.
there was a whole
trying to convert titles to hundreds of 28. You know, that was a big deal for me to get that idea. And the idea to forget about trying to stuff and none of the stuff was good. Any of the work would have been really aggressive.
It was never, I spent a lot of time
out here up on the top some of the things that Windows things goes in and I mean, some of that is built at best. Anyway, I would be happy to do it. I need a little more time to put things together. The end of the month,
one of the things I'm working on is writing up about new awesome browsers. I have a really awesome new browser
where you type the character. I don't really want that. I want
so I might be able to pair up with you.
There was an interesting article in Linux
doing visual V, Shift V, and Control V. Control V especially.
I was kind of starting when I bought the Beagle. The idea that what I would do was just put that, just leave it in there. Because I'm all internally involved. But I'm going to go outside to read it today.
Actually, it's not that bad. You need to set up so you don't use plugins or no translation.
Okay, well, that's the only thing I read. And I was using. They use that.
I'm not sure why it's not. My computer thinks it's
And I
right.
couldn't do that, so I ended up going to Quickfix. And when I did that, it's a UDP. And supposedly, I'm supposed to
I found a thing that said,
plays
fine.
That's what my next stop. And then I said, trying to run all this crap.
Because
I said, I'm better off with my email store and email or something. You know, I went to email, then I ended up breaking my phone.
Repair.
I did it, I ended up with pieces.
So,
And I was gone for a week, so going to Washington next week. So that's kind of what I did.
Yeah,
This week,
So, yeah, just catch back on the email thread and we can talk about it. And the idea is, I'm writing a plugin, I expect them to use it, but I don't want to tell them.
You, have that to deal with. I'm not getting any mail under ENS. Got it all queued up until I get my thing operating. Get it back. But if you could drop me the same thing on Google.
Just hang off.
Are we ready, Shane?
Yeah.
So in your own MRC, there's no reason for you to say.
I can see it.
Hurricane's larger keyboard one.
The what?
Hurricane, a lot of people think, oh, DNS key by default is // so I must.
It's just like their IPv6 tunnel, that's not code, it's just a different synopsis. It's kind of hard to easily check the plugins, choose where, and you can use that as your background.
Will you run a VM on there, Shane?
Nope.
Yeah.
I like Hurricane Electric. Yeah. But success has worked out pretty good.
So who's running torrent and ruining it?
Yeah, as long as we can see the.
Yes.
There's. Okay, there's.
Then I drove all day moving some stuff around.
You're just getting all the windows in the right place.
Oh, broke your system, eh?
Oh, yeah, but not only that, I got much.
Well, I mean, you know, they could probably look at the vibe. Oh, yeah, we already got a back bar.
Okay.
This should work.
They tell me every one of my courses.
Cool.
I can't even get them.
Yeah, this is so cool. I didn't know you worked on a desk.
I'm just normal. I'm just dropping by today.
I'm gonna send you some requests of,
I really wonder who didn't sign this list.
Well, you walked right past me. Plus our attendance book. Let me just write under the right. We have exactly what
Yep, it's working now.
anything else you need before we get started?
I did. The speakers work, yeah. Okay, cool.
All right, crew, let's grab a chair.
I'm just here by myself today.
What?
I'm just here by myself
Is that video
today.
going to be on the website?
Okay. And Tom, I said hi.
Eventually. Well, yours is going to be on the website, right?
Didn't ask.
Sorry? Yours is posted. Today, your video is posted where we can get to it, right?
This?
Is that okay with you?
It's posted on YouTube right now.
And he's recording it. We'll wind up doing a recording that will
We're working on it.
our website for archives.
Okay.
It'll be a little different, different video.
Well, do you have all your old archives yet or not?
I have them all somewhere.
Okay, well, we can do a mass upload.
Yeah, we can do basically.
Okay, group. We have Shane Carr with us tonight. Last month at our meeting, the Heartbleed problem had just become known, and Andrew had some good insights and comments about it. Shane, in the last month, has actually put together a live demonstration of just how you can do a Heartbleed exploit.
Yes.
And they've done this over at WashU. Shane is the president of the ACM, Association of Computing Machinery chapter over at WashU. He's also a major in computer science, chemical engineering, and doing a minor in nanotechnology over there. Sadly, he's going to be absorbed into the collective for 3 months this summer. He's going to go and find out how that business company, not a computer company, a business company up in Seattle, Microsoft, do an internship with them for a few months. But he really is an open source guy. He's actually been a contributor to on GitHub, Octave.
Yeah.
Give me the title again.
Octave Online.
Octave Online?
Yeah,
okay.
That's one of them.
And that's his most prevalent one or favorite one. He's also contributed to a number of other projects, and so he is one of the open source guys. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shane, and we'll see what we can do with Heartbleed tonight.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Okay, so cool. The slides look like they're working. So Gary already introduced me. I'm Shane Carr. I'm president of WashU ACM, which is the main computer science group over at WashU. I'm a rising senior now. So here's the outline of our presentation today. I guess first I'll just talk a little bit just to make sure that we all know what Heartbleed is and how it works. Then I'll do the coding demonstration. Then we'll talk a little bit about keeping data safe. Then we'll then I want to put Heartbleed in context with some of these other exploits that have been found, and then we'll finish with a little discussion. So first, let's just talk about a little bit about what is Heartbleed. So it's essentially, when it comes down to it, it's a coding mistake in the OpenSSL library. Does everyone in here know a little bit about OpenSSL? Okay, yeah. Just in case, since some people aren't completely familiar with it, it's the library that powers a large fraction of secure data traffic and data transfer on the internet and elsewhere. So it's used by millions and millions and probably like trillions of servers and stuff, right? So so when there's a coding mistake in OpenSSL, it gets propagated pretty widely. So the mistake was made on December 31st, 2011, actually a few seconds before midnight on December 31st, 2011. and it was fixed on April 7th, 2014.
So who'd they blame?
We'll get to that. So
Bill Gates.
it's a buffer. It involves the idea of a buffer overflow, which those of us who are programming in languages like C might be a little bit familiar with. And it basically allows an attacker to read an SSL server's memory. So I'm going to try clicking this button, and this is just a little video with a guy who talks a little bit about buffer overflows and how they work. It's about 5 minutes long, and it's a pretty good intro video. So if I can get it to show up on the screen, maybe this. There we are. Here's the guy. Okay.
Of modern computer science.
So we're
they
just
are
going to watch this.
responsible for glitches in games. They are responsible for all sorts of viruses and exploits, and they're also responsible for some major technical disasters. And the last 48 hours, as I record this, we've had one of those major disasters. We've had Heartbleed, which is, well, at its heart, it's a buffer exploit. So let me try and explain what that is, and the technical folks in the audience will perhaps cringe at how much I'm oversimplifying this, but for the non-techie folks out there, for the folks who are just starting programming or interested in computers, this is how it works. And first of all, don't worry, if you're using a high-level language like JavaScript or something like that, you don't need to handle buffer overflow. It's all taken care of for you in the compiler. But if you work in C, in Fortran even, in something down at the metal, as it were, well, buffer overflows are something you have to watch for. So let's imagine that we have a program. Let's just put a box here, some sort of program. And that program is expecting input. Now this might be a massive file from the hard disk. It might be any kind of data coming in. But let's say it's just a string, just some text coming in. And that string is meant to be a certain length. So that program has set aside a certain amount of memory for it, just here, inside it. Only what comes in is not what it expects. What comes in is a much longer, or maybe even just slightly longer, bit of text that isn't being expected. So instead of this, we have this, a little bit more. And what happens is that rather like a train plowing through its buffers at the end of the platform and screaming into the station, it's going to do some damage. It will continue writing that string into memory past the end of that reserved buffer space. And that's going to cause crashes. Generally, that's going to cause a malfunction in the program when it looks for data and finds nothing, or whatever just got typed in. But if you're a clever attacker, if you know what you're doing, if you know what your target is, then you can craft a much longer string just here that contains all sorts of instructions, all sorts of code. If you know what that program is going to look for next, you can just keep on writing into that program and put your own instructions over what's in there. That's a basic buffer overflow attack. Now, the last 48 hours or so, as I say, we've had Heartbleed, and that is a vulnerability in OpenSSL. OpenSSL is the open source code that handles about, let's say about half, 2/3, certainly a very large proportion of the world's secured web traffic, the stuff that goes between you and online banks or you and your private email account. All of that goes through OpenSSL. It's basically responsible for making sure there's that little padlock icon in your browser, making sure that can pop up and say, yes, this is definitely a secure link. So a bug in that is a really big deal. And it's interesting because it is basically a buffer underflow attack. And to explain it, I need to explain about something called Heartbeat. See, if I've got my computer, just here, my laptop, and it's talking to a server over here with OpenSSL on it, it can send something called a Heartbeat command. And the Heartbeat command is essentially, is this connection alive? Is it working? It's basically it goes back and forth between the two. And the Heartbeat command works like this. I send some data, and the server sends it back to me. So I say, here is the word heart. Please send that back to me. And the server does. So that's not quite how it works. What I send is, here is the word heart. It is 5 bytes long. Please send those 5 bytes back to me. And the server does that. It receives them, and it sends them straight back. But the trouble is, with this particular version of OpenSSL, if you said, here is the word heart, it is 64,000 characters long. Well, OpenSSL isn't going to check that that makes sense. Instead, it's going to open up a little buffer, put the word heart in there, and then it's going to send me back whatever else it can find. It's just going to keep reading from that buffer, despite the fact the buffer is ended, it is going to read 64K on whatever it is thinking at that moment, and it's going to send it back to me. And that's dangerous, because that 64K could include some very private data indeed. It could include session tokens, which let you impersonate other users on the website, or it could include private keys, the big cryptographic numbers that say that this server is who it claims to be. If you get their private keys, you can impersonate them. You can impersonate whoever this server happens to be, Google, government, online bank, get those numbers, pull them out of memory by luck, by chance, or by being very clever, and, well, you can claim to be them. And that is a crippling security bug for the internet. So over the past 48 hours, a lot of system administrators have been desperately patching, trying to make sure that their version is the new, up-to-date one. So there you go. That's a buffer overflow, or a buffer underflow in this case, and that's Heartbleed. But one final thought, if you want to be paranoid, and I want to stress, I'm not paranoid about this. I'm a firm believer in cock up before conspiracy. But if you want to be paranoid, just have a think. That bug went unfixed for about 2 years. Did anyone else notice it and just not tell the world, and has been quietly extracting information ever since? Or if you want to get really paranoid, and again, I stress I don't, but if you want to get really paranoid, who put that bug there in the first place?
Okay, yeah, so that's just a quick intro to that aspect. So Heartbleed has been very much in the news. It's about a month ago about now. Most of the active servers and stuff have been patched by now, but it's still pretty relevant to us. Here's just some of the headlines I could found. They range from places from the St. Louis Dispatch to the BBC to the Wall Street Journal to the New York Times. So all these different news sources here. Here's just a couple of the headlines. The error was actually originally written by a programmer named Robin Segelman in Germany. He was one who wrote it. You know, there's some interviews with him. I'm sure that he's gotten lots of mail and interviews and stuff. He doesn't work with the OpenSSL project anymore, but that's just a little bit about what Heartbleed is. So now we get to go to the code demo, the fun part. Okay, so I'm going to slide right over here to a VM running Ubuntu 14.04. If it runs, maybe, yeah, let's see, type it in, there you go. Okay, and then we're going to do a little code demo here. So let me. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Now we're actually online. Okay, cool. So what I did here was I went to I basically coded up a little program thing that sends and receives heartbeats from servers. I based my code off of the GNU TLS library, which is actually quite similar to OpenSSL. It's just a library that lets you do secure connections to servers and like send data to them and all that stuff. We can see a little bit about what's happening behind the scenes here. So if we go over here and just say make run, and then it goes and does this little thing. It's a little bit bigger so you can see a little more. We can see what it's doing here. So I think we start up here. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so here's where I ran make run. Okay, so you can see what it's doing. First, it goes ahead and loads in all of its different ciphers. Lots of different options for it to connect to servers, because some servers like to send different ciphers than others to encrypt the data. Then it goes and sets up. It goes ahead and loads in the extensions it needs, and then we're going to go ahead and connect. So we can see that first it starts with its handshake, here, and then the server says hello. Then it goes ahead and it's going to parse the certificate. So you can see here's the certificate right here. The site I'm connecting to is cloudfairchallenge.com, which I'll explain a little bit later why it shows that particular server to connect to. So it connects to that server, then it goes ahead and receives the certificate. So here's a certificate coming from that server. And then I go ahead and accept the certificate. I already accepted it earlier, so we don't have to accept it again. If you connect to a new server, it'll ask me whether once you accept the certificate. And then it goes ahead and does the handshake. And then right down here, it goes ahead and sends a heartbeat. So it says it's sending heartbeat of type 1 in size 16. And you can see that this is the heartbeat it sends. This is just a random heartbeat. These are different random bytes. The way that this is outputted is the top. And we can see that a couple milliseconds later, the server responds just as we expected with the exact same text. So this here is no bleeding yet. This just shows that the heartbeat is actually working. So here's where we send the heartbeat up on the top, and then here's where we receive it again down on the bottom. And then we go ahead and close the connection. So that's what the
type
server
1
is
and
right
type 2. Type 1 is a transmitted heartbeat.
Yeah, type 1 is transmit, type 2 is receive. Yep. So it goes along with the metadata of the heartbeat. There's how it actually works is the first byte of the heartbeat package is the type. It's either a 1 or a 2, and then the second 2 bytes is the size of is the data length of the heartbeat. That's the part that's unchecked, and then the next however many characters is the actual heartbeat signal. So again, there's the first byte, the first 3 bytes are the metadata, and then after that is the actual data that we're sending. Okay, so just to simplify things, right here is where I just check out a lot of the extra code that you can't see. If you want to actually see where it is, I can go ahead and open it up right here. This file. This is actually all the code that does all the stuff I was just showing you. But since that's not really particularly relevant to the heartbeat, but it's still necessary for it to happen up in a different file, and so we can focus on this one. We're writing the code here. Okay, so we're first going to start by let's just go ahead and write another line of code here that's going to send a custom heartbeat to this server. So we're going to say this is going to be called a custom ping, right? And then we're going to say, let's just say hello, 11 bytes long. It's just going to say hello world, like that, right? And then we're going to go ahead and send that. Send custom heartbeat is the function name that I'm using here, which sends to session hello, and the last argument is the flag. So the first argument is just the compute TLS session that we're using. The second argument is the data, and the third argument is the flags. Right now, we're not sending any flags, although we will very soon, because that's what's actually going to help us do it. So if we go ahead and make run, we can see that it does all the same stuff, and then it goes ahead. It sends the first heartbeat that we already saw before, which is random bytes, but now it's also sending hello world. So it's actually sending that heartbeat for us. Sending hello world, sending it, and then we're receiving it right back again. Does anyone have a special quote that they want to send to the server and have the server respond with it? Sure, SLUG. Okay, so we can go ahead and do that. That's 5 characters long, I believe. So we can go ahead and make run. We can see that. You can see that it is indeed sending slug, and it's coming back with slug. This extra byte here at the end is like, I need to look into technical with it. It's always a set F. Sometimes it has F at the end. I'm not exactly sure why. It's just part of the C. It tries to automatically detect how long the string is, which sometimes is quirky when you're writing in C. But I just said that for simplicity. Normally, of course, you would pass an extra argument in here that would say how long the string is, but I decided to take that off for simplicity. So,
Hold on 1 second. Victor, what did you say?
Can you send it to an infected server so we can?
yes. Well, that's the next step. The site cloudfarechallenge.com is the sort of standard site that people are using to demonstrate this. So that's actually what we're going to do right now. We're going to send an infected ping. So we're going to send a bleeding ping. Okay, and this here is when we get into the is when we actually get to see what I modified in the GNU TLS code to make this happen. So we're going to go ahead and open up. I think I can pictures from here. So we need to open this. File open. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and go here. I believe I put this again. No, sorry, lib. There it is. Okay. So this here is a file that I sort of modified a little bit to allow us to do this bleeding thing. So if we go ahead and there it is. So we can see that right here is the line when it goes ahead and when it's sending when it's sending a when it's sending a heartbeat, what it's going to do here is it's going to normally it would just when it's writing the byte here, that's data size. Usually it would just write data size. But what I did was it sort of sends data size plus bleed amount, which if it's going to be a little bit fussy there, that there is the line that I added. So instead of just sending the truthful data size, it's going to send data size plus some bleed amount that we're going to define. And then we end up defining this in, we'll go ahead and end up defining this down here a little bit. The way I implemented this was using these flags. So you can see that a little bit. There's 3 different flags you can send to the function. You can send GNU TLS heartbeats bleed small. And then that's going to bleed us 16 bytes. You can send GNU TLS bleed large, which is going to bleed us 16,000 bytes. And just for kicks, I can show how this works. You can also send GNU TLS heartbeat bleed negative, which sends negative 256 bytes, which again, it's not going to check whether it's too long or too short. So you can send negative ones, and this actually allows you to write to the server's memory as well as read from the server's memory. So. So that's the code changing that I did there in the GNU TLS library. So we can actually go ahead and try that out now. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to send a custom heartbeat session, and so we can send the same string we sent before, but now we're going to go ahead and send GNU TLS bleed small as a flag, right? So if I type this in right, if we go ahead and type I'm going to make run, looks like I need to type over. What is it not like? Sorry, it's GNU TLS heartbeat bleed small.
I notice you're keeping your 2 previous sends.
Yeah. I mean, I could delete them, but again, heartbeats just go back and forth all the time. So we can see that here's where we start bleeding. So we still send the slug, but now we're getting back slug plus this other stuff. Like, we're not supposed to be getting back that other stuff, but we're getting it back. So let's go ahead and do the same thing, but now let's go ahead and, just for demonstration purposes, we can go ahead and do bleed large here. Which is going to send us back a lot more information too. If I can spell large, I'm glad I'm not in English class right now. It's going to send make run, and now it sends back lots and lots of stuff. We say that a lot of the times it's kind of hard to sometimes get information out of there because like a lot of this is null, null, null. But we see that there actually is a lot of information that we're reading out of the server here. Like, what is this? It's, I don't know.
External.
I mean, there's definitely stuff in there that's readable. This could be passwords. There could be private keys in here. There is lots of data in this stuff that the server is bleeding out for us.
Are you sending characters, or are you just changing the length of the string?
I'm changing what my client is telling the server. This is how long my heartbeat string is.
So you're sending it a different length for a short string.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then why doesn't the server allocate the length?
Because that's where the coding mistake is.
Okay, so that's the coding mistake.
That's the coding mistake. It should make sure that the length that I say my string is indeed the length of the string that it receives. But the server doesn't. The server's not checking that, and that's where the error is. If you want to actually, I can go pull up the code in OpenSSL that actually does this, which I did at the presentation I gave on this 2 weeks ago at ACM, but I found that the code is very hard to read, so it doesn't really add a lot to the presentation, which probably also contributes to the fact that it was there in the first place. It's really hard to actually read the OpenSSL.
So basically what you're saying, there's a length pointer that gets transmitted with the heartbeat, and the receiving code looks at the length of the string, not the length pointer that's being sent.
Other way around.
But then when it responds...
Right, now when it responds, it looks at the length that was sent and not the length of the string.
Right. The length that it said it was sent.
Right. Because if it looked at the length of the string when it received it, it would overwrite the buffer for that, and you just get chunk back. But it's not. Okay.
As I say, if we could open up the XKCD, it's the best explanation.
That's an excellent explanation in XKCD.
Yeah.
What?
One of the popular cartoons, Daily Cartoon, gave a beautiful explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Cartoon's supposed to be a comedy, right?
No.
Oh.
Not really.
I don't read.
It's more like a satire.
Yeah, I don't look at cartoons.
This is life.
I don't waste brain cells on comedy.
It's not comedy, it's commentary.
Okay, go ahead.
Reality.
It's an art form.
An art form.
Okay, so just for fun, we're just going to show how we can also actually, first I'm going to go ahead and switch this over to another server which I made on Amazon EC2. So if I go ahead and drag this guy over, I can't really see it too well there, but I've got lots of instances running on EC2. I made one instance here where I compiled a vulnerable version of OpenSSL. It's if you get your servers, if you get your like Apache and OpenSSL from like apt-get or Yum or any of those package manager things, those have the most up-to-date packages now. So if you use that and you just run apt-get upgrade or Yum upgrade, you're all set with having a secure server after you restart your server. After you run apt-get upgrade, you do still have to run Apache control restart to actually have the secure version running. But if you want to get a vulnerable version, the way you have to do it is you have to compile it from source. The old-fashioned configure, make, install, all that stuff that they did way back in the day, right? But I'm kidding. So yeah. So this here is an example server, which we can just hack around with a little bit more too. I have a connection to it up here, I believe. I'm just going to connect. It did connect. It looks like it should. Okay. It's a different color on there than it is on here. That's fine, I guess. Okay. It works. Yeah. So we can see that. Can't really see a whole lot. Let me open up a new window with a different color, maybe. New window. How about? Let's see if this color works better. Who here has used Amazon EC2? It basically allows you to open up little instances, little Unix instances, Windows instances, whatever you want, and you can play around with them. And they're pretty cheap, and they have really good internet connectivity and stuff. And it's kind of like an alternative to a VM in some ways. You can also run WebSections. Okay, so it looks like we can see this a little bit better. I think maybe. So is it big enough for everyone to see? I think so. Okay, cool. So if we go ahead and say ls, cool, now you can see stuff better. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and this right here where this is OpenSSL 1.0.1, which is I noticed that someone wrote on the board over there the different vulnerable versions. This is 1.0.1F, which is one of the vulnerable versions. There is one thing I want to mention about the vulnerable versions of OpenSSL. You need to be careful about the packages that are in apt-get and yum. Say 1.0.1e, but they're actually safe. They took just this Heartbleed patch and patched 1.0.1e just in the Ubuntu and Red Hat repos. So if you do apt-get upgrade, you will be safe even if it says you're running 1.0.1e.
Unless you have pin.
Right. So we can. So this
Pin back to
the URL of. I'm going to go ahead and go back to VMware, and we're going to go ahead and just attack this one, Heartbleed it. So we're going to go ahead. It's going to be IP. What's the IP? The IP is 54.87.119.37. And you also need to give it the host name, which is going to be EC2 54.87.119.37.compute1.amazon AWS.com. Okay, that should do it. So now it's going to be doing stuff on this server, on my personal server right there. You can see that it is indeed bleeding some data out for us. It's not the same data that we were getting from the other server, and in fact, when you type this back and back again, you see different things. So, like, here's the internal ID of the server. Maybe we wouldn't want people to be getting that. I don't know. That's and there's lots of other stuff that can happen here. Let's go ahead and put some clues into the code by doing a negative ping just for kicks. So we're going to be doing a negative ping here, include negative bleeding ping, which is going to be, let's go ahead and make it, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste in the Declaration of Independence for us, right here. Just because that's a relatively easy thing to paste in. I believe that does it, right? Something like that. Okay, so I promise I do own one text, just not in Linux. I own it in there. And then we're going to go ahead and send that heartbeat. I'm just to save time, I'm going to type it really, really fast for us. You see my magic typing. And then in this time, we're going to be sending the heartbeat negative command here. And then just for kicks, we're going to go ahead and send another bleeding ping down here, just for kicks. And then we're going to go ahead and run it. And we see that just to demonstrate how we can write memory onto the server using the negative one too, which again writes it into never space, so it's not really that. This is just more for the demonstration purposes. We see this is in the second. This is when we send slug, and we get back. This is the second time we get back slug, but we also get back part of the Declaration of Independence too. So, which is kind of an interesting touch there. So you can sort of read it. Right, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness is there. Okay. So now I could go ahead and the way to fix this would be to upgrade my distro of OpenSSL to a modern version, which I'll do later if there's time. But just for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and do some of the other stuff I have planned today. The first one of those is going to be MSF console. So who's heard of MSF console, or the Metasploit framework? This is sort of a couple of people have heard of it. So let me just go ahead and log in. This works best on Ubuntu. Modern versions of Ubuntu doesn't really work too well on other operating systems. So if you use this, you have to use, or you should use Ubuntu. It'll take a couple seconds to boot up here. And it's going to boot up. It looks like it's working. Oh, I don't have it open somewhere else. Oh, there it is. There it goes. Okay, so whenever you boot it up, it gives you a funny image. So like this is like an image of like some like character with a sword, right? Sometimes you open this up, it gives you a picture of like of a bag of coins from a bank or something like that. Just for the humorous aspect of this, I suppose. So this is the it's a collection where a lot of the exploits that have been found are all coded into the Metasploit framework, the MSF console. MSF is Metasploit framework, and it gives relatively user-friendly ways to exploit these different vulnerabilities on the server. So it happens to be that someone took the time to code Heartbleed into Metasploit framework. There's thousands of exploits. All the ones you can read about online are all coded in here. So we're going to look at the Heartbleed one just so we can see how it works. We're going to say it's in use auxiliary /scanner auxiliary scanner SSL /open SSL Heartbleed. So we're going to go ahead and open that up, and now we're in the console where we get to do Heartbleed stuff. So we're going to say set verbose true, just so we can see all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes. We're going to go ahead and attack my personal server on the same one we were doing before, the one on Amazon EC2, and then we're going to set action dump, if I can type right, and then we're going to go ahead and say run, and then it goes, and there it is. This is the Metasploit version of what we just saw, the more low-level version that I coded. This is the same thing, but in Metasploit, so it's a little bit easier to use, I guess. So we can see this is the printable info leaked, and we can see that there is some stuff in here. Yeah, this is like maybe some of the stuff that I was using when I made the certificate request, so maybe I wouldn't want people seeing that. And like, you know, what's this indie library base? I don't even know what that is. So there's like lots of stuff in here. It could be the case that there could be, you know, private keys in here and stuff. And in fact, the one site that I used as an example earlier, Cloudflare challenge.com actually had a challenge when Heartbleed first came out, where if you're the first person who can steal our private key, right, you'll get all this like acclaim and stuff, and people were able to do it. And if you, it takes a lot of tries, maybe because every time you have a heartbeat, it in theory like scans a different part of your memory. And if you run it enough times, so like if you take this and you let it run overnight, you will eventually get private keys to a lot of these servers. I was able to do that on Cloudflare Challenge. Now, of course, when you're playing around with this, you can play around with cloudflarechallenge.com. If you want to, you can play around with my EC2 instance. I'll leave that online for a few more days before I take it offline to like say, because they like charge me like a few cents an hour. You know, there is a list which you can find online of sites in the top like 100,000 sites that are vulnerable to Heartbleeds. Some of them you may have heard of, some of them you may not have heard of. And you know, I don't recommend attacking them or exploiting them, because that can get a little bit fishy. There's been news stories about people who've gotten like arrested for doing that. So like, I'm not going to do that since I'm on camera and I'm on YouTube. I'm not going to do that for you today. But yeah, and you probably shouldn't do it either. But you know, if you want to like just see how it works, maybe just do a couple bytes here and there. You know, that's up to you. So this is something that's very easy to exploit for any server that you want. Okay,
Does
so
it potentially damage the server? In other words, if you overwrote a buffer in the wrong area, it executes a code over you, or is it?
You could lock up
It's an event.
you could lock up a Daniel.
So basically, if you're running against your own site, running against site of people you know,
Right, it's just lock enough to correct when they don't place on the desk here.
But you'd be writing at that point.
In this case, you're reading, though. I mean, unless you do the negative, you're not writing out there, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if you do the negative, I mean, it's sort of like the way the code is actually working is it allocates a string that's 64,000 bytes long, and it only writes to the first 5 bytes, and then it reads to the rest. So you're writing to like to useless memory, I guess. You know, you're writing to the not active memory, if you will, when you're actually. But I more did that for the demonstration purposes, just so that you can go both positive and negative. But although writing negative is not really going to harm anything, except perhaps there have been people who like in the Cloudflare challenge, like wrote private keys using the negative feature of writing heartbeats. So they were writing false private keys to make everyone else be like, oh look, I got a private key, and it's actually not the right one because there were trolls going and writing wrong private keys using the negative. So I mean, yeah, that's sort of how that works. Okay, any other questions about the code aspect before I go back to the main slides? Okay, let's go back to the main slide to see if it's still open. There it is. Okay, so keeping your data safe. So the basic steps is doing the obvious things. Patch your servers with the fix, do a sudo apt-get upgrade, and do a sudo yum upgrade. And install all security updates for your devices. Because of course, OpenSSL is used. It's most widely known for being used on servers, but it's also used on like devices, your phones, and your whatever other electronic devices you have, computers, everything. So you should make sure to install some security fixes for those. It's a lot more difficult to exploit a device that's not like always connected to the internet, but it is possible to do it. So you should just make sure to patch both your servers and your devices. And
I posted up on Discuss last night or this afternoon that Jelly Bean, Android release, whichever release Jelly Bean is, but that whole release is got the Heartbleed vulnerability. So if you happen to have an old tablet or cell phone, what Jelly Bean is.
But you're not really pushing services to users on it, though.
True, but someone can.
However, a household NAS, which you have pushed through your router, so that you can access files from home that has this exploit, could be a little fun.
so so just make sure to install the updates on all your devices and stuff. And if you're paranoid and you think that people did know about Heartbleed for a long time and have been collecting data for a really long time, it's also recommended that you do these other things too, so that you revoke your certificates, make new private keys for all your servers, which you probably should do if you're running like a bank or something like that, for sure. Just to be on the extra safe side. On all sites that have been vulnerable to Heartbleed or are now patched, you should probably change your password and any private data on those sites. And if you have vulnerable devices, patch them and change your passwords and keys and stuff. Because of course this vulnerability was around for over 2 years in the OpenSSL extension. It was found simultaneously by 2 different people. One guy from Google, his name was like Neil. He found it in mid-March, and then like a week later, people from Codemnicon, which is a security company, also found it. So there happened to be these 2 people who sort of found it within a week of each other independently, and then before that got merged in and fixed in the OpenSSL source. But again, that just happened. That was a coincidence that those happened at the same time. And 2 years before that, it was open. So if someone besides those 2 people happened to find it before and was using it maliciously instead of informing people about it, you should probably be on the safe side and just make sure that you secure all your data and stuff, because again, even if servers may have been patched, you may still have had data that was vulnerable in those days. That being said, I do want to talk a little bit about something else. So the National Vulnerability Base lists Heartbleed, which is CVE 2014-0160, as a level 5 of 10. How does this compare to other vulnerabilities? So let's go ahead and click this link. I think just click that link. Is it going to open? Ooh, it does open. Cool. Okay. So this here is Heartbleed in the National Vulnerability Database. You can see that's listed as a 5 of 10 in terms of the base score, the severity score. So, I mean, yeah, that's it's something to be worried about. But let's just go ahead and go to vulnerabilities, and let's just like search for. I'm going to be doing an internship at Microsoft this summer, so I'm going to search for Internet Explorer. First, I'm going to search for this, right, in this vulnerability database, and it gets back like over 1,000 records and like 9, 9, 10, 10, 10, 10, 9, 7, 9, right? And like all these are very recent too. Like look at the dates. This is Heartbleed was 4.7. This is like so. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, Heartbleed has been getting all this press and stuff, but I mean, there's a lot of other vulnerabilities that I'm equally worried about. And I mean, if you're really paranoid, you should be changing your password every week. Has been getting a lot of press. So just to also just to compare this, like, okay, remember that there's 1,000 vulnerabilities for Internet Explorer, and now I'm going to just look up OpenSSL in the same list. And again, this just searches for like everything that happens to have the word OpenSSL in it. But you can see that there's a lot fewer. There's 157, and a lot of these aren't even OpenSSL. Like this is about this one is about Android, and you know, Android's doing it. This is like OpenSSL and Ruby. So I mean, you know, curl and libcurl when using OpenSSL extensions like this. Like this isn't even this is a bug in curl, not OpenSSL. So I mean, overall, OpenSSL has a very good track record of being safe and secure. So just because of Heartbleed, you shouldn't stop using OpenSSL. In other words, and you know, and like most of these are, you know, relatively low numbers.
Question.
Here's Heartbleed.
Go ahead. Question. What's that say about NVD if they don't even know how to classify a vulnerability properly?
What do you mean classify?
Well, it's not an SSL. It's in Ruby or Rails or.
No.
Those are other examples. I just searched for the term. This one here is. Okay. This is Heartbleed here. The one that had like Ruby was like was a different one. This is CVE 139. Right. This is the Heartbleed is CVE 016.
Oh, you did a text search. You didn't do vulnerability search.
I did an overall text search for OpenSSL.
Can you bring up 196?
Sure. What's the 2014-0196?
Yep.
Is that yours? Is that yours?
This one? What's the date on that exactly?
5/7. So
yes,
what's that? Last week. Original release date, and then last revised was a couple days ago.
2 days ago.
Yeah.
Linux kernel high vulnerability. Keep an eye on it.
Which kernel?
All of them. Well.
What version?
No. Amber's too old. It won't affect that. Don't worry. I know a particular enterprise that has all of its servers older than this exploit.
So yeah, that's a really good demonstration that Heartbleed's been getting all this press, been getting all this crap thrown at them. But in the grand scheme of things, I mean, there's lots of things to be worried about. So that's sort of goes on to one of the discussion questions is why has Heartbleed gotten so much press when other potentially more serious vulnerabilities have gone under the radar? Then I also have some other discussion questions. I want to make this sort of a collaborative thing. You know, I've been standing up here talking at you for like 45 minutes, but let's go ahead and have a little discussion here. So what do you think about the first question here?
A really good name. That's always a
really good name and picture and branding.
But there's actually two reasons. A, everybody is immune to vulnerabilities from Microsoft products, which is the majority. So this is the only one that has a major impact that comes from an open source tool.
And there's across every platform.
Yeah, well, and major impact, multiple platforms.
So that's the reason.
Or is it because the open source software was honest about the mistake?
Well, that contributes a lot too.
Well,
and you can look at the code.
That's a secondary reason, but that's not the reason. It's got the publicity. But we were talking about publicity. That's why people were honest about talking about it. I mean, there could be hundreds of these in Windows 8, and we'll never know it.
But perception of free to read is perception of open to exploit, to anyone changing it without traceability.
Then we need to educate. Everybody mentions that to me. I try to educate. And we had somebody last.
Possibility is that the NSA may have pointed this.
Well, no.
Well, that's why it's gotten the press.
No. I think the NSA brought up this whole, we want to look at security more, and then Mr. Journalist was like, oh, I'm going to run with this.
You did a search for Internet Explorer. What would the outcome be if you'd done Firefox? I'm just curious. Maybe I'm wasting everybody's time.
No, if you want to, you can actually get the mailing list and search these yourself. If you work in, if you're interested, I would seriously advise you to join the mailing list for CVEs, and then whenever they come out, you can get them, and you can actually learn a lot more about what's going on out there in the world. But yeah, if you search for Firefox, you're probably going to get 500 medium lows. Yeah.
Joint mailing list for what is CVE, like?
Common Vulnerability and Exploit from NAST, National Institute of Science and Technology. NIST.
Are there any cases known of actually this exploit being used? Because I'm hearing there were arrests in Canada of people who broke into their social security stuff, but I'm not sure it's related to that.
Yeah, reason it was discovered by 2 researchers is they were actually working on a hint of another exploit, not related, about 2 weeks earlier. And they stumbled upon this simultaneously because they were working on another exploit. Okay? And they kind of found this by accident. It's impossible to prove that, other than looking on your server and seeing if there's mystery user accounts. If your shared memory is suddenly full, there's lots of ways to go around looking. If you do any validations of your servers to try to see if there's anything that's changed on it. As far as like a bank coming out and saying they were exploited, that'll never happen.
One of the big problems is that a lot of these outfits are not declaring the high level that their key was stolen, and we should make it a high level. And the problem is the way Chrome does verification of certificates, they use essentially a blacklist of only the high level ones, and most outfits that revoke their certificates, they're not going to say that it was a high level. They'll just say it's a low level administrative reason, and it doesn't wind up on the blacklist for Chrome. Is the Chrome browser the thing that's in the Chromebook?
Yeah, the Chromium browser project, yeah. But it also leans off of the work of a lot of other groups. So Firefox uses a somewhat similar system. I mean, blacklisting, every time you install OpenSSH, for example, you get a blacklist file of all keys that have been known to be bad for the last 10, 15 years.
Right.
So, that's one of the things is you install that, and like half of that install size was this blacklist file.
Cool. That's cool.
Back to your question.
Back on the discussion questions. One other thing I just wanted to throw out there is there are all these pretty major Internet Explorer security issues everywhere. This one's probably gotten attention, I guess, just because it's my personal opinion is that when we think about OpenSSL, we think about security. When we think about Internet Explorer, we think, oh yeah, it's just normal for things like that. To have security vulnerabilities, like OpenSSL has security in the name, like literally Open Security Sockets Layer, right? So also as in here in the open source community, and especially with OpenSSL, there's 4 people who work on OpenSSL, and no one does it full time. There's just a bunch of volunteers from various I mean, they're getting more money because of this now, but they're when this when this code originally happened, I mean, people work on it on their free time. So look at the commit date. It's a few seconds before the new year, right? I mean, people work on it during their free time, as do everyone in this room as open source enthusiasts. We work on all these projects. So I mean, and there's not. It's when something happens to Microsoft, there's they've got big, huge lawyer departments to help them out. There's not really anyone out there to really advocate as much for OpenSSL.
One thing to point out, a lot of people may confuse OpenSSL with OpenSSH. OpenSSH was not effective.
Yeah.
But it does use the language. It's not effective. It does use the language. But one of the problems with OpenSSL is that it has worked flawlessly for so long that it did not have an active community. And that's what's happened with a lot of great software. It just keeps working and working and working and working and working, and nobody pays attention to it.
Yep.
There was I believe this was in the Mythical Man month, where the author suggested that we have 2 sets of programmers, one who writes very good code and one who writes very fast, sloppy code. And they have the ones writing slow, writing code slowly but very good, write the stuff, and the other one, because they've had to learn test techniques, debugging the code. And if the code gets too good, if they start not writing enough bugs, they need to write some bugs into the code to reward the other programmers so that they're able to actually find.
Well, Easter eggs are actually less popular as people work on more serious projects.
Well, this is suggested for serious projects, that your debuggers need to find a tidbit from time to time in order. So
job security, okay.
To get their reward, they have to find stuff.
But actually, it goes down to the same thing.
To keep them from becoming complacent.
Yes.
It comes down to the same thing, though. Not to say that us programmers are just mere dogs, but it's dog training. I mean, when you train rescue dogs, you have to let them find somebody now and then, just so they remember this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to find somebody. We're rewarded when we find somebody.
I mean, a lot of them.
And they really and they really get depressed when they find somebody with it.
So you have to really treat those special dogs carefully.
So we can talk just a little bit about question 2 here too. There have been discussions I've seen on social media and stuff about what does Heartbleed tell us about things like code review, unit testing, and even choice of language for these projects. The language C doesn't have a particularly beautiful track record in terms of having security. So should we even be using that language when we're writing OpenSSL?
The language there's been record.
Right.
Programmers have the track record.
This is called semantics in the programming classes. You learn the language's syntax, but you also learn the language's semantics. And the semantics you use determine the readability.
Well, it's also the libraries.
And the libraries.
The C string libraries are a complete mess security-wise. I don't think that's a problem here, but you really couldn't use Java for this because it's a library that's used underneath other languages, so you have to use C or C++. Well, choice in this case.
But if they had a library that was written with the goal of doing this stuff readably, and if the coding style, if the coding style is written.
Right. I can't understand their API volume.
Yeah.
Completely obtuse to me.
Which API?
The OpenSSL API. I don't really understand much of it just looking at it.
Well, and I think that's the kind of the problem is it worked for X number of projects for 10 years straight, and it's nobody wants to touch it or mess with it.
So it works. Why fix it?
And it's called legacy code. It's called legacy code.
Well, see, the difference is that this legacy code is, it's completely open source.
I wasn't casting aspersions. I was just saying it's code that gets drug along because it works. Not because it's the best solution, because it needs to be looked at on a regular basis.
Right, and so one of the problems with OpenSSL as legacy code is that when it's drugged forward onto a platform or whatever, only that part is duct taped.
Right.
You know, there's never a complete rewrite.
That's
one thing about this is that the idea of writing code to be provably correct or to be testable, so that it proves itself debug free. This is a fairly new concept, and if code got started before that started being used, well, it's not that new a concept, but maybe a lot of people haven't gotten it yet. But if it was written before that concept started being used, then it's very hard to retrofit.
Well, see, as Mikey says, if there's only 4 developers doing this and they're very part-time, there's not really enough eyes, enough time, or enough care.
Now, one thing I pointed in my post to the list was that there are open source projects that are being sponsored by corporations. And maybe maybe the group that does that needs to think about
OpenSSL now it falls under a foundation which is well-funded.
Okay.
And as they throw resources at this, Linux Foundation brought together everybody and just tried to create a middleman saying, hey, here's where to invest. I work on some very large software projects that are funded and kind of infrastructure is handled by a commercial corporation. Now, if these projects weren't popular, they would never have gotten that kind of attention. So, like OpenSSL, because it's not, nobody really cares, no corporation would have ever really reached out and, took it under its wing.
Do they care now?
Corporations? No, they don't care. It's fixed. It'll be good for 10 more years. That's all they really care about.
It's like asphalt.
They threw a lot of money at it.
It's just there.
But now there's a question of whether the solution here is to replace the team. The OpenBSD project, not that anyone in here isn't a good OpenBSD supporter, but the OpenBSD project decided to fork OpenSSL, and they started the LibreSSL project. And one of the first things they did, and we're talking about the legacy stuff in there, they took out 90,000 lines of C code, which applied to VAX VMS and Windows 3.1. And
I think they're up to 10 users right now.
Hopefully they don't get paid by line of code.
Well, that's it. You said they're up to 10 users. They just started this a week or two ago, but yes, do you want to reinvent the wheel, or shouldn't you get with the guys who've been working on the wheels here and help them out?
Is the source code for the bad and the good versions still available?
Yeah.
If one of us wanted to look at it tonight,
yes,
examine and compare the code.
Yeah, and this here actually is the actual commit that we made that fixed Heartbleed in OpenSSL. So this here is the OpenSSL library. This was made on, I think it was the 7th of April, I believe, and you can see some of the stuff that was happening here. Just for sake of clarity, I want to uncheck this box, which hides people's comments, just so we can see the code here, the code that's happening. So like this right here is basically what the magical part, right? So it's actually going to be checking now. Before that, they didn't have this line. I mean, this is the code. This is the line that was added to OpenSSL, right? So then they added this part that goes ahead and checks to make sure that 1 plus 2 plus payload plus 16, if that's length is greater than the actual record length that we actually received, go ahead and discard.
Just discard the whole thing.
Yeah, you just discard the whole thing. And if if you do, if you run my code against a patch server, what it does is it sends a heartbeat and then it just doesn't receive anything back. It just sits there and reads, and nothing actually happens. So yeah, that's what OpenSSL will actually do when it's actually secured. I mean, this is line like 1,343. I mean, like, I don't know, and it's in like a file called like d1both.c. So I mean, Personally, as an outsider, I find that a little. I just find the like files where they put this code like not necessarily easy to follow. So I mean, it's pretty difficult to follow the OpenSSL code. That's one reason why I use GNU TLS instead of OpenSSL for my demo running the client-side code, just because it's better organized in my opinion. But yeah, this here is the actual code, just in case you're wondering. And since it's open source, you can see it. So yeah. And if you want to see the code from the demonstration I did here, I also have it on GitHub. This URL here. And it tells you how to install it, how to get my fork of TLS, tells you how to get that. And it goes ahead and tells you how to run it and stuff. So yeah, just in case you're interested. And yeah, that was my presentation for today. If you want to stay after, I can go ahead and show you how I can recompile the OpenSSL on my personal server on Amazon Web Services to have a secure version of OpenSSL. If you don't believe me, I'll show you that it is relatively easy to recompile it to a secure version. And yeah, any questions for me? Or it's almost 9 o'clock, so.
Cool. Jumping back to your question a few minutes ago, has anyone found this actually being abused? Yeah, what you just mentioned about somebody arrested in Canada. It was the son of a college professor. I believe he was a comp sci professor, and he did this after this all became public, and he decided he would do it against the Canadian IRS, and he downloaded 900 user accounts from their files, which caused the Canadian tax system to delay their tax date by 2 weeks, I think. And yes, they arrested him and hauled him off.
But there actually is there are some methods to mitigate this too with load balancers, just in case that comes up. If you want HA proxy to basically grab the inbound traffic and kind of check it, you can actually write some filters.
Andrew mentioned
I
a good
have
thing.
a couple of servers that are part of vendor-provided packages, and they were running versions of OpenSSL that were too old to have a vulnerability.
Right.
So if it was anything older than what .98, whatever, so I had a couple of them that were okay just because the vendors hadn't updated their code in a long time.
Which actually is one of the weird things. Since we met last month, in the first 4 days, there's somebody, you got to prevent Bundy. Anyway, they started tracing how many servers, well-hit servers out there had the vulnerability. It's actually gone up since last month because people, like you were saying, they've got packages and they go, oh, well, we'll just put in the latest package. And frequently what happens is the package has the OpenSSL in it. By moving to a newer release, they've gone from something that was too old to have the problem to something that now is 1.E or whatever, 1.D.
Because something that old doesn't have anything, there's no other problems with that old code. No other security problems with the old code 5 years ago?
No, it's actually missing the feature.
Right, but there's been no unrelated problems with
Right.
that
So
code?
this heartbeat feature was kind of added.
But what about unrelated to Heartbeat? Any SSL exploits in the last 5 years besides Heartbeat?
I'm sure that we could go through those CVEs and look, and
Right.
there might be.
So a version that's 5 years old probably has vulnerabilities, just that's not that public.
No. There might be some very public vulnerabilities that are only exploitable locally and are not considered a high risk.
The difference is locally, you mean it has to be within the local network?
So for example, curl loading the OpenSSL library to do something for itself, it may import it incorrectly because of something wrong in the OpenSSL library. So yeah, there's always going to be bugs, and it's just where you are. This Heartbeat, you can sit across the world and exploit it.
Right. You don't have to be inside the local network.
You don't have to be on the same network.
I'm talking about the level of definition is based upon how exploitable it is.
Right. So if you can get it to share with you one extra character from the time of the day, it's a very low exploit.
to say, I was, after this became public, like after a couple of weeks, I'm not sure if they fixed it today, probably not maybe. I was going around and updating all my computers that I'm running Linux Mint 14 and 15 in different places, and if you update through this Linux Mint update, it installed the version 1.01c, which is vulnerable, and there was a manual by some guy that you can find on the internet how to install it manually from Debian testing this version G. So that's what I have to do manually on every computer installed. So officially Linux Mint 14 and 15 are not supported. There is a 12 that is long time support and 16 that is current. And so obviously they're not to blame about that, but the fact is that if you update and it says all the pluses and all the questions, all the no problems, check marks on it, it's still you have to check the version.
So yeah, if you find yourself in that type of situation, you can do what's called an package pinning. So an RPM and an apt or whatever, you can actually tell it, force it to use an older version. You can actually tell it you must use 9.8. And you can
14,
pin too. Yeah.
14 and 15 Linux Mint, they came with 1.01.
Right. And what you can actually do is you can actually tell it revert, go back in time. And it's a pretty rare feature, but it can be helpful.
Another weird thing that we kind of touched on, the news media coverage has been less than stellar because most of the media we're talking about is general reporting media, and it's not all computer experts. So there was a whole bunch of coverage that said that, oh yeah, there's now they found the last 5 months there's been a lot of broken handshakes, and I never did find out exactly what a broken handshake was, but they've since found out that 6 months ago there was some completely unrelated piece of software that came out on the market, and it does this broken handshake. And whereas first they were saying that this last 5 months, when people went back and started looking at their logs, seeing these broken handshakes were a symptom of Heartbleed, and apparently we don't know that for a fact. The fact that it seems to be overlapping with this new software that came out that is known to do this broken handshake, it's probably not related.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Shane.
Come back next month.